This video was actually done a couple of months ago, but kept being pushed back, and then the remaster came out and at least partially fixed the main focus of it. But thankfully for me, the remaster managed to make some weird decisions related to the Howling Voice guild, so I can recycle the video a bit. But keep in mind that some of this was made before the remaster came out, so it doesn't always account for it. So for this video, we'll be taking a look at all things related to everyone's favorite assassins. As always, this series contains spoilers, so without further ado, let's get started. While most of what we learn about the Howling Voice guild comes from Suikoden 2 and Suikoden, they are also mentioned in Suikoden 3. Specifically, if you choose Chris as the successor to the True Fire rune. In this route, when the True Water rune goes out of control, Chris has a special scene with her father where he explains that he had to leave her because he was being hunted by agents of the guild. However, in the English localization, he calls them the Roaring Brotherhood instead. In the Japanese version, the wording for the Howling Voice guild remains consistent across the series. This inconsistency in the localization likely happened because the translator was either unaware of the existing terminology or simply didn't care to cross-reference. Whenever Clive's gun is brought up in conversation, it's called Sturm. This is normal for the Howling Voice guild, who tend to give all their weapons names in German, though Sturm is the only gun in the world supposed to have a soul of its own. When you have Clive in your party, though, it's only called Sturm when it's upgraded the third time and only in Japanese. In the original, it's upgraded as Wind, Windstoss, and Sturm, which translates as wind, gust, and storm in English. In the original localization, the translators apparently weren't able to connect that this Sturm was the same one that was talked about in the game, but also didn't bat an eye at the fact the words were German and just translated them into English. Poorly. Because here it's wind, storm, and tornado. So its actual name, albeit unnecessarily translated, is now in the middle. But the remaster is where things get really dumb, because here someone had the brilliant idea of changing the original German words into other German words, none of them Sturm. In the remaster, it upgrades as Windschuss, Sturmschuss, and finally Zyklonschuss, which is an insane thing to do. These names translate as Wind Shot, Storm Shot, and Cyclone Shot. In Suikoden 2, there's a side quest involving Clive, where the player has to reach certain checkpoints before the game's timer hits a certain hour, culminating in a duel between Clive and Elza if you're fast enough to catch her. However, the English localization introduces several issues. During the Muse segment, the translators clearly misunderstood the lore, leading to errors about Elza's relationship to Clive and Kelley. The translation portrays her as separate from them, but in Suikoden Volume 1, Elza explains that the three of them were a family of sorts that eventually became something like lovers. As a result, Clive should be referring to Kelley as our brother, not my brother. And Elza's dialogue shouldn't suggest she wasn't part of that relationship. And during the finale of Clive's quest, the localization takes some creative liberties with the guns are described as if they crave blood and feast on souls, which isn't the case in Japanese. And during Elza's final monologue, the translators seem to think she's addressing the hero rather than Clive. But rather than me telling you what should be said, why don't we take a look at the scene in its entirety, retranslated? And to close us out, here's an extra tidbit for you. As you probably already know, you can bring Clive to Rockland in the original Suikoden, and he'll comment on how Elza's grave is a trick. What you might not know is that there's actually a different line here, because this only exists in the script files and is never called by the game, where Clive instead says he's wasted his life. We'll probably never know for sure what purpose this line serves. Possibly they planned to have some sort of quest all the way back in the first game, but never finished it. However, if that is the case, they cut it very early because this is the only line in the game that remains of it. It's also possible they originally meant for this to be the end of Clive's story, but then figured they could do more with it in the future and changed it so he doesn't believe it.